Welcome everyone to the Southside Korero. My name is Vincent Tyron Vitalina. Well, we're here to discuss about the importance of vaccine and COVID. We wanted to have this discussion is because there are a lot of, especially in our times of just of confusion, as well as just a lot of questions that are being asked. Here in our podcast, we basically want to open up a forum so we can allow those within our groups to discuss what's need to be told. So, for example, we had a doctor not too long ago that we just finished talking to, so we got that podcast sorted, and we're going to talk to many other folks out there. And this podcast is basically brought to you by Exonerating Aotearoa and accompanied by Blow Your Mind podcast. It's amazing. Go listen to it. This is Vincent Vitalino, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of this podcast. So I've been doing my research, by the way. A wonderful bestseller, as well as amazing superhero to those who are here in South Auckland to push STEM out there, and amazing, intelligent people out here who are benefiting from that. So again, thank you so much for coming in.
Kia ora, Vincent. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited that this is your first podcast and I'm your guest. So yeah, real honor for me.
Thank you. I'm kind of nervous. So please do, if I do get a little bit stumbly, I saw your podcast, by the way, with Professor Collins about what he's gone through in terms of COVID and going through the different South Auckland communities. It's an important conversation to have in terms of not only within South Auckland communities, as well as in the wider Auckland region. So for our lovely listeners and viewers, why is this vaccine so important?
Oh, the vaccine is so important because, well, we have this pandemic and it's around this thing called a novel coronavirus. And the word novel means new, and it means that we've never seen something like this before. And so the vaccine allows us to protect against something that we really still don't necessarily know what this thing is and what its long-term effects are. And we've been able to figure out at least how it replicates, and therefore what some of the features are on it. And with that, we've been able to develop a vaccine to protect us from it. Many people, when they talk about this coronavirus, they're just looking at death numbers. Only this many people died, therefore it's not that dangerous. But actually, the truth is we really don't have a full understanding, because it is so new, of the long-term consequences of getting infected with this virus. And we've heard this thing called long COVID, where you could be affected for the rest of your life. And so, getting the vaccine just means that you don't have to sit for the rest of your life going, am I going to get a symptom? Is there something going to pop up because I once was infected? But instead protect yourselves and your families, by just getting a simple shot that literally protects you.
Absolutely. So I am a recipient of both shots, so I'm fully protected. We do have those who are on the fence in terms of the vaccine rollout, because a lot of them are not too sure. They're not well informed. Would you be able to just walk us through of what might be in this vaccine, so they can have a good understanding of what's going through in their bodies?
Yeah, great. So we never say what might be in the vaccine. It's totally transparent and it's totally clear. The ingredients are all available online. The challenge we've got is, even if you read a bag of Pringles, right? Take a bag of Pringles or a bag of cookies and read the ingredients. You're going to find there's a whole bunch of ingredients on there that you don't know what they are and you've never heard of before, because science have these wonderful ways of using words that are really complex that just mean regular things. So inside the vaccine, we were going to have some really simple things. We're going to have some salts, and those salts help to buffer the water. Water is in there. There's going to be some sugars, and those sugars are really clever. What they do is they help the contents to not get damaged when they freeze, because we know this vaccine is frozen before it's shipped to us. There's a thing called the mRNA molecule, which you can talk about later. That's the active part. That's the bit that actually does the thing. And then there's some fats in there. And the fats are designed to protect this mRNA molecule, the messenger, which is very, very delicate on its way into your body. So actually, there's very few ingredients in it. Most of it is water. And the dosage is very small, 0.3 of a milliliter. So basically a drop or two of liquid that goes into your arm. But when you read the ingredients list, it won't sound like water and fats. It'll have all of these chemical names on which is what we refer to them as, and which is why it can be quite hard to know what's in there.
Absolutely, and coming from a community that don't really know much of the terminology, it sort of becomes very daunting. But when you have a lovely person like yourself who's able to sort of break it down for everyone to understand it, it's a good thing, because we're just looking at it going, huh? The big words. Big words.
And I always say to people, if you looked at the ingredients of KFC, and they would never share those ingredients with you, but it would be the same thing. Like, I love KFC, but there's no way I could pronounce most of the ingredients they put that makes the skin taste so good. So just because you can't pronounce it doesn't mean that it's not amazing.
Absolutely. And KFC, if you're listening, you need to share those secrets. But coming back to thank you for explaining what would be inside a vaccine. So we've already gone through why is it so important to basically get this vaccine and what's inside it. Now, as a friend, as a colleague, to many of my other friends who are on the fence, how would you try to get them involved into the sort of rollout? Because a lot of them, again, a lot of questions and anxieties, and then how would you go along and go, hey, you should try this?
Look, and being on the fence is okay, right? It's okay not to trust stuff and to go on a journey of making sure that you are okay within yourself, to make sure that this is right for you. I think the challenge that I'm seeing is a lot of people are getting their information, their scientific information, from their friends who don't know much about science, from social media where you don't know who's written the thing, from YouTube videos where you're like, anybody can make a YouTube video, anybody can claim something. And I think one of the challenges is we're living in this amazing era where the world is so connected by the internet, but it's also a really challenging era because there's no way to verify what is true and what is not true. And also things could be true but highly biased versus making sure that they've gone through some editing. So I say to people who are on the fence, cool, there is a whole bunch of stuff out there that's really confusing, and I am not surprised, especially if you don't come from a science background. And a little bit of my journey, so I never came from a science background, neither my parents graduated high school, so I grew up where I would have been that person, be like, I don't understand it, right? I don't know. And luckily, I fell into a few lucky things in my life that got me a scholarship. So I eventually went to university later in life and then learned the system. And it is a system. The science system is all about these rules that they don't really talk about anywhere else. And now I've learned that system, like, okay, how do we bring this back to just regular people who need to get this information quickly? So being on the fence is okay. I think some of the things that I've seen, though, that have not been true are things like the vaccine is experimental. It's not experimental. The clinical trials have been done and they are closed. I've seen people do dates and say, oh, but it's still being monitored till 2023, 2024. That's standard. No matter what you do, you still always, if you have a group of people you can follow, they are great data sets. You will always keep following those, but it's not an experimental vaccine. I've seen people say that the mRNA, so that's just a little messenger molecule that goes into your body, and it tells your own cells how to make the little spike protein that your body can recognize and learn how to fight itself without you ever having being exposed to the virus. I've heard people say that can go into your DNA and change your DNA, and it can't do that. So inside your cell, you have ribosomes, which is what the mRNA molecule connect with. Your DNA is inside another sort of protective membrane, and there is just no way that mRNA can get through that protective membrane and affect your DNA. So not true. And if you just go to a high school book and look up a picture of a cell, you'll see where everything sits, and it just can't get through that protective membrane. If everything could get into our DNA, we'd be in serious trouble. So our DNA is highly protected by our body. And so I've heard things like it makes you magnetic. It doesn't make you magnetic. It's physically impossible. And I say to people, there's a great video, which is, it's a super old video on YouTube, but go watch it. It's called How Are Magnets Made? And if you see how hard it is to make even like a fridge magnet, there is no way that if you look at how tiny the needle is and that you're only getting 0.3 of a mil of a dose, even if all of that was solid magnet and all of that was injected into your body, which couldn't get through the needle, you still wouldn't be magnetic enough to hold a ruler or a spoon. And don't forget, the things that you're seeing people stick to themselves. Mostly I've seen metal rulers and cutlery, knives, spoons. Most of those are made from stainless steel that aren't magnetic anyway. So if you actually put a magnet next to them, they wouldn't stick.
Not conductive.
No. So not magnetic. So that's also not a thing. So those are some of the things that I've seen that look really believable on videos. But actually, if you take a little step back and have somebody just explain the fundamentals, and there's some fundamental science there, and how it's just actually impossible for those things to happen. I would say if those are your fears are based on those things, then those are things we can work with, and we can do some experiments to prove to you that we can't put metal through a syringe needle that's of any significant size. Also, people are worried about, there's stainless steel in the injection and that will kill you. Well, if you think about things like hip replacements, pacemaker parts, they're all made out of stainless steel. So we know that steel in the body actually is a big part. Like I had my hand rebuilt because I had a bit of an accident. All of this is, stainless steel inside my hand. So we know that the body doesn't react to certain metals as well. So yeah, if you're on the fence, that's cool. Let's go through some of the things that you've heard and figure out if that's the thing that's stopping you and whether or not we can run some experiments. We'll try some things to see whether or not it's true.
That's awesome. And again, going through all those theories, a lot of people that are not going through their own forms of research and whatnot. It's interesting to hear because I'm hearing a lot of those research that a lot of people are doing and go with their theories, and it's definitely important to do your own form of research. You mentioned before that some places where you can do your research. So if I were to go from here, from listening to this podcast, where would I be able to go to in terms of find my own research? If I wanted to go, put my foot out and finally have a look around and see what's going on, where can I find the resources to have a look in terms of vaccines and whatnot?
Yeah, so the best place is the Ministry of Health, right? The Ministry of Health has some amazing resources and they're easy to understand. They're really clear. Outside of New Zealand, the CDC, the World Health Organization, all have things that are really, really clear and give you evidence. So what they do is they say, here's this thing, this is what we say, and then below it will be a link to a scientific paper or a clinical study that will say, and here is how we got this data, and here's how we made this conclusion. Because you have to remember that all of science is around data collection, and then you come up with a hypothesis, and then you test it, and then you come up with a conclusion. And that conclusion will change as you get more and more and different data. I think one of the things that happened early on is the World Health Organization collected all the data that we had from China and made a statement that we believe that the novel coronavirus, this new thing that we'd never seen before, didn't spread very much through the air. We thought it was more contact, a bit like Ebola, that it was more direct contact that it was spread by. So there was probably no reason for you to have to wear a face mask because we just didn't think from the data, the small amount of data from China that we had that was spread through the air. It became very apparent as soon as it spread through Europe and different data was collected and spread that was not true. And it definitely was an airborne virus. And so then we went, change of plan, put a mask on. We have more data. It's more broad data. We have changed our mind as scientists. And that does happen a lot. So being able to look at the links and go, what is the current data that we have and what are we learning is really important to go. Sometimes science changes its mind because we have more inputs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So with that said, we're sort of now armed with our own research and whatnot. We're going into our first steps into going in to get our vaccination. What would be your advice when you're going into getting your first shot, pretty much, because it's an experience and a half, pretty much.
Yeah, so look, we're really lucky here in New Zealand. We have amazing people who are dedicated to making sure that, number one, when you arrive at the vaccine center, if you have any questions, there'll be an expert there who can sit you down, talk you through your concerns, make sure you know what's going to happen. Which is, I think if you're going in nervous, being able to have somebody who's there to reassure you would be, really good. And we're really lucky in New Zealand that we get to do that. Getting vaccinated is so easy. And it's such a tiny needle that I don't know about you, but I didn't feel mine when they went into my arm. I was like, are you done yet? They were like, I'm done.
Absolutely. I didn't feel anything. So when myself and Judy here who went in to get our first shots, we basically were nervous, but we had done our little pep talk. So we got ourselves ready and we just talked to each other. It was like, okay, and I will distract you and it's done. So it's just, honestly, it's just done. And
yeah. So I didn't feel mine. It was super easy. I had a small side effect, which is that I had a sore arm maybe for the next 12 hours afterwards. And then I was totally fine, didn't have any other symptoms. But I think being aware that people, may have a sore arm because you've just injected something in there and you just had a needle in there, that makes sense. If you cut your hand, you'd have a sore hand. So that happens. And then, you might feel a little bit like your immune system is working because it is. So it's training on how to fight something. And so you may feel a little bit run down. You might feel like, you've got a bit of a head cold coming in. Everybody reacts differently because our immune systems are very, very different. So just being prepared, making sure you're hydrated, having some paracetamol ready in case you get a bit of a headache. But the symptoms for the majority of people are pretty minimal and much, much less than if you actually got the virus itself. But yeah, going in with a plan, finding out if you're nervous, what the process is at your vaccine clinic. You will have to wait 20 minutes after you get the vaccine. So bring a book or something to keep yourself busy. But yeah, I think if you go in knowing what happens, you're sort of less nervous about what the unexpected might be.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I definitely echo that notion where you bringing a friend is just, it just sets your mind at ease, and it brings a sort of safety between you, and as well as just the waiting period. When I got mine done, I basically had the sore arm for the day, and I was bedridden for the rest of the day. Just read a book, watch whatever I needed to do, but I kept my fluids up at the same time. Finally, just one more question. It goes back to basically to everyone who's, again, this podcast is pretty much about the unknown, and we want to make sure that everyone is okay with this sort of thing, and just going forward, your own advice in terms of the ongoing situation, especially in lockdown. What 3 golden advice would you give to those who are in that time period of just in lockdown? What would you give them? Like a message of hope.
Yeah. So what message number 1 is lockdown is hard. Like, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to feel like it's really hard. So make sure that you're reaching out to people for support. Make sure if, like I've lost a lot of work, if your finances have decreased significantly, that you are able to access the government subsidies if they need it. You may be able to borrow something from a friend, or just be like, hey, is there anybody who can help me get some food into my house today? Like, it's okay not to be okay. And there are lots of people out there offering help. So don't feel like you have to struggle alone. There are things out there. Number 1, like, lockdown is really, really hard. Number 2 is social media is sometimes the best and sometimes the worst thing. So if social media is your source of information, just before you read something and you believe it, whether it's good or bad, whether it agrees with you or not, go, who wrote this piece of information? Where has it come from? And what if I were to argue with this piece of information? Like, imagine I was to play, devil's advocate on this piece of it. Could I find any holes in it? Is there anything there? Because I think it's so easy to believe everything, all these snap headlines and all of this stuff. But actually having some critique around stuff that we read makes us just make sure that we are getting the information that isn't just frightening us, but has come from a good source and isn't designed just to constantly scare us. And number 3 is make sure that you're still connecting with people. It's really easy in lockdown to feel very isolated. I set up, Zoom chats with my friends that are in the diary. So I know that I have to brush my hair at least once a day and look like respectable, because it's so easy to just slob out and sort of lose focus and lose direction, and then get really lazy and then feel a little bit down. So I schedule my exercise. I make sure I've done an hour walking every single day. It's scheduled in my calendar, so I can't be too lazy. But having some structure, I think, to your day is really helpful, and connecting with people, even if it's online, is really helpful. So those are my 3, but also accepting that it's tough and days are going to be tough, and that's okay.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you so much, Dr. Michelle. Just awesome things. Where can we find you? is basically our final question. Where can we find you? Where can we find your amazing smile? Because, oh my goodness, I've been smiling throughout the entire conversation. I'm like, that's a beautiful smile. Where can we find you?
Oh, thank you, Vincent. So you can find me pretty much anywhere, just Google. So if you have young children on Nano Girl pages, we have a Nano Girl YouTube channel, or a Nano Girl Facebook page where we do stuff so that your kids have activities and can keep learning about science and technology. Otherwise, Dr. Michelle Dickinson is a brand in its own. You can find that on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all other places, and both are on Instagram. I'm everywhere. And, if you have an idea for something, I always say message me. Usually we try and make a video on it or try and solve somebody's problem. So one of the things we try and do is bring science to everybody. And if you have a great science question, let me know.
Awesome. Again, we're dealing with an everyday superhero, folks. Thank you so much again, Dr. Michelle.
Thanks, Vincent.